Hey everybody, wanted to teach a little bit today and just chat with you all about kind of that within our training, what our ultimate result is, right? Which is to race better, race faster, race stronger. Shaving some minutes off those finish times is absolutely possible. We've helped some athletes do that, and I want to kind of teach you some staple ways on how to achieve that for yourself. So, we work with athletes all the time, and they're putting in a ton of mileage, a ton of time, within their training, which is awesome. You need to do it, right? You have to build that foundation, but we want to optimize that, right? So we want to make sure you're utilizing your energy systems to their full potential, and giving you the most metrics and helping you figure out how to utilize those metrics is absolutely something that we want to achieve. And through my experience, through grad school, we did testing, and I worked with a lot of athletes in the collegiate setting. And then when I worked for Ironman here in Houston, we worked with endurance athletes doing a lot of metabolic testing, VO2 max testing using the cart and the treadmill. We did blood lactate testing on the treadmill by doing gradual step tests. So every 2.5 to 3 minutes, you increase that pace. You take a blood lactate sample, increase the pace, check the heart rate. Every 3 minutes, you increase it again. Check the heart rate, take a sample, increase it again until that athlete pretty much fails, right? So for years and years, we did these tests in the lab setting on the treadmill, same metrics, same protocols, regardless of the athlete. We just changed the pace. Well, as we all know, or should know, or understand, science is ever changing, it's evolving, right? And so when our human performance team got eliminated, I partnered with a testing group out of Europe, and basically have now been able to utilize testing in a much more scientific way to help athletes shave that time off their finishes and truly optimize their training outside of a lab setting. So one of the things that I kept finding over the years at Ironman was we would get inquiries from athletes endurance athletes saying that they wanted to do a VO2 max test, right? So I'd have an Ironman athlete or a marathon athlete come to me and say, hey, I heard about this VO2 test. I want to find my VO2 max. Well, the caveat to that is it's great. We can find your VO2 max, but what are you going to do with it? Right? So one of the questions I would present them is, when you get this number and an estimation, what do you do with it? Well, I can find some heart rate data off of it and then go from there. Well, same thing with the step test, with the blood lactate test. As those, as your pacing increases, as your intensity increases, you're going to produce lactic acid. So when I measure that sample, I know it's increasing until threshold. So we're getting a threshold number, but what do we do with it? Right? Is it really giving us the answers for your energy systems that we need to find? Well, through more research and data analysis, we found this, it's not the answer. It's not the most accurate answer. So the testing now that is going to help you the most out of the lab setting, we're able to give you about 4 phases and truly find out how much lactic acid are you producing, right? Where's your ceiling at? But not just that, how efficient are you at recovering from that, right? How efficient is your aerobic system at utilizing that lactic acid as energy and fuel? That's the key. That's what we want to find out. We know you're going to produce lactic acid. You could get up from your chair or what you're doing right now, go take a walk. Your anaerobic energy system is going to start working, right? It's going to shoot out that byproduct. Once our aerobic system starts working, it's going to utilize that byproduct as energy and fuel. That's the main goal, right? So if you think about it, that's why the warm-up sucks a lot, right? So throw your shoes on, you stretch out, hopefully, and then you take off on this run. Well, the first few miles, depending on what your distance is, it's probably going to suck. And one of the reasons is because your anaerobic system is working. It's shooting out this byproduct, but that aerobic system isn't warmed up enough to utilize it as energy and fuel. Okay. Now, once you get a few miles in, your heart rate might start to come down. You start to settle into that run. Now I'm feeling good. Well, that's because now that aerobic system has warmed up enough and it's able to utilize that byproduct as energy and fuel. Okay. That's what we want to find out. That's what we want to find out within your pacing strategies. Okay. So long story, with VO2 max testing, I could have 3 athletes with the exact same VO2 max. But the way that they are economically more efficient within that VO2 max can be completely different. So 3 marathon athletes, VO2 max of 50, right? Just an excellent VO2 max, but they all have like 15-minute differences between their pacing. All right. And what that means, what we need to look at, is just because you have a great VO2 max does not mean that you are utilizing that, lactic acid, that byproduct, efficiently. Okay, same with the step test. Just because your threshold is a specific number, that's great, but how well is your energy systems working to utilize that byproduct as energy and fuel? Okay, so some of the steps we want to take within, being able to get that ultimate result is to do this testing to figure out and understand how much lactic acid are you producing at a sprint, at a fast pace, at your slower pace, at your zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. How much lactic acid are you producing and how efficiently are you recovering from that? So when you climb a hill or you transition from cycling to running and you've got some lactic acid in your legs, you push up a hill, as you're coming back down, are you going to be more efficient at flushing that lactic acid out, or is it just going to sit in your legs because your body does not know what to do with it? Okay, so figuring out that data information is a game changer for a lot of athletes because we can take it to step 2 with that, right? So if you're producing a lot of lactic acid, that means your aerobic system is not working as efficiently as we want, which means that fat burn state that you want to be in for endurance isn't really happening. Right? Because if you're producing a lot of lactic acid, that means your anaerobic system is working a little harder. That means that we are busting through those carbohydrate stores. So I have a lot of endurance athletes that think, hey, I'm doing an endurance event. I must be burning a lot of fat. Not necessarily, right? You could be overworking at these pacing strategies instead of underworking to build that foundation. Okay, so how are you going to utilize that lactic acid? How efficient are you at utilizing that lactic acid? Okay, that correlates with that caloric combustion. Are you more of a fat burner versus a carb burner at certain paces, at certain zones? We need to fine tune this, right? And then with that, where's your heart rate settings at? Okay, so where's your heart rate in correlation to your zone 2? Where's your heart rate in correlation with some of these zones? Okay, so truly fine tuning that data and then utilizing your new zones, utilizing the new data. All right, so there's a lot of different metrics that we want to look at to help shave some time off of these finishes. Okay, for example, we had an athlete that came to us and training for Boston needed to shave about 30 seconds off of his average pace. Okay, so he was putting in the miles. Well, when we went and did the test, we did 4 phases, okay, differing intensities. And that's because we wanted to measure that peak lactic acid and how efficient at recovery. Okay, well, on his longer kind of, zone 2, zone 3 pace compared to his sprint, he produced almost the same amount of lactic acid. Okay, not a lot, almost the same amount. So one of the things that we noticed was aerobically, he had been putting in so many miles, aerobically he was sound. His body was good. He could run for days, essentially. The biggest aspect that we found was his muscle strength, right? His leg strength, his turnover rate. He was fatiguing due to muscle fatigue prior to his aerobic system shutting down on him. Okay? So it was harder for him to push faster because he hadn't done hill work, tempo work, sprint work. He was just putting in a lot of distance, right? Which is a common misconception for a lot of athletes. They just think, I need to put in more distance. I need to put in the miles. Well, you do, but at the same time, we have to make sure that both energy systems are being tapped into to utilize what we need more efficiently. Okay, started to adjust his training, throw in a little more tempo work, and boom, like that, 20 seconds shaved off. All right, so his 3-year goal, 1 year. Here we go. So prospectively speaking, what we're gonna do is track this over time. So I have this test of his that, has a great VO2 on it, but he didn't have a very good ceiling to push that lactic acid, that greater turnover rate. Vice versa, I've had sprint athletes. They've put in some distance in the past, and so they're not used to pushing through that threshold feeling. So what we realize is they have a very low ceiling for lactic acid, and we had to push that training so that they could push that ceiling, produce more lactic acid, and then teach themselves how to be efficient with that lactic acid, how to recover and be more efficient. Okay, so with all of these studies, with all the case studies, with all the athletes we work with, we go through this testing, we run their data, and then we see over time we're able to track depending on if they're going from a full distance to a half distance. That VO2, we only want it to stay the same, if not increase. But we're going to see all these other metrics start to change over time depending on where they are in their race season and what race they're training for. So don't get so pinpoint on one specific test. And also understand that your general step test is not the most accurate way to find things. All right, we know with increased intensity and speed, you're going to produce lactic acid. We know that for a fact. What we need to find out is how efficient are you at producing and utilizing. Lactic acid isn't the bad guy. Lactic acid is almost the door opener to possibility, but we just have to learn how to be efficient with it and how to utilize that. All right, so we basically do consultations, free consultations, and then we run through this test either remotely, virtually, or in person. Run your data, consult with you, your coach, and then we're good to go, right? And then you're going to start to see how to optimize your training specifically for you. All right, but it all starts, you just take that, do this test, retest, utilize your data, retest, utilize your data, and then you're going to start to see this change over time. All right, I hope you all learned something. I hope you have an awesome day, and we'll chat soon with a follow-up.